So he's saying in there, the two key phrases, the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail. However, minority possesses equal rights. That has been written before. That has been argued before. Does anybody know where we've heard that line of reasoning, that the majority will prevail, but the minority has rights? It is not Washington. Christianity here? No. Okay. You guys are all throwing out names. Can I point out that this is a document? A set of documents, if that helps. A set of documents where we've heard this before. Matthias is correct. It is the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers. Yes, Carol hates this class. That's okay. It hates you back. All right. So the Federalist Papers, specifically Madison's the one that makes mostly the argument. Okay. Bottom line is this argument's been made before. Not surprisingly, Madison and Jefferson are close. They have very similar belief structures. They are kind of the rocks of the Democratic Republicans. All right. So he says, which equal laws must protect and violate would be oppression. Okay. There's a key reason why he uses the term oppression. He's saying, majority won. We won the election. But let's not forget that the minority has rights. Otherwise, it's oppression. So I'm not here to say my will is the only will, okay? Yes, I won, and there's consequences to elections. However, we are not just going to dominate the Federalists, okay? There's a reason he says that. He's trying to make sure the Federalists understand that he's not going to enforce two very controversial laws. What laws were they afraid he was actually going to enforce? Have we forgotten the dark stain on Adams' presidency? Two very controversial acts that made it very possible to arrest people, to deport people, and Sierra is correct. Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien and Sedition Acts. The idea here is that, if he enforces what Adams had put in place, he could start to jail some of the Federalists, okay? Because this was the threat against the Democratic Republicans, especially the people that wrote newspapers, okay? So he's basically using the term oppression to make sure they understand that he gets it. That, it's not okay to say, hey, that law is unjust, and then get the presidency and then enforce it, okay? So he's saying, what you guys did, I think was terrible. I'm not going to enforce. And he lived up to that campaign promise. He did tell them, I'm not going to oppress you, and he didn't. Okay? And let us reflect that having banished from our land that religious intolerance under which mankind so long bled and suffered, we have yet gained little if we countenance a political intolerance as despotic, as wicked, as capable of bitter and bloody persecutions. During the throes and convulsions of the ancient world, during the agonizing spasms of infuriated man, seeking through blood and slaughter his long-lost liberty, it was not wonderful that the agitation of the billows should reach even this distant and peaceful shore, that this should be more felt and feared by some and less by others, and should divide opinions as to measures of safety. But every difference of opinion is not difference of principle. So he's saying, look, we can disagree. We can disagree, but the principles are still the same, okay? We can disagree on what the principles mean, but they're still there. So for example, if a principle is freedom of speech, we can disagree on what speech means, but we all agree that you have it, okay? So he's basically kind of pointing out, like, the Constitution is always going to be there no matter what we view it as, okay? Anybody recognize when he says religious intolerance? Who's he really talking about? This is not easy. This is a hard question. When he says religious intolerance, who's he really talking about? Okay? All right, so I assume that's Sanam who said England. Very good. Okay, and Stauffer being very specific on King James. King James was dead by that point, but you got the right mentality. He'd been dead for about 150 years by that point. Okay, but for those of you that are running King and things like that, you are on the surface correct. He's talking about Britain, because remember, we germinate from Britain because of religious intolerance. So he's hearkening back. And here's the thing, he's not a religious guy in the classical sense, meaning when somebody says, oh, we were founded on Christian morals and Christian principles, he's not really down with that. He instead believes that we have a overall power in the universe that's kind of controlling everything, and there's no real specific religious teachings that go along with it. Does anybody remember what that belief structure was? Okay, this was in your readings, by the way, from last week. Okay, Sierra's correct. It is deism. Okay, the idea that you can. Sorry, and I will stay closer. All right. So the idea here is the belief structure of deism is that there is a higher power. It's not really defined. There's no real teaching that goes along with it. You can read the Bible, you can read the Quran, you can read the Torah, you can read any religious text, because it's still referring to a higher power. So he would still believe in a God, but not a specific type. All right? That's what deism basically is. If you want a very simple version of it, think of Star Wars and the Force. Okay? The Force guides you. The Force is around you. It surrounds you. It controls the flow of things. But there's no real, you never watched, if you've never watched a Star Wars, I'm sorry, the illusion probably is not helping. But if you have watched Star Wars, it's not like Luke gets down and prays to Jesus in the middle of the film, okay? It's just use the Force, okay? Just immediately, the Force is deism, okay? So George Lucas would have definitely been somebody that understood what deism truly is, because that's basically what it is, okay? Now, then comes the most quoted line of the document. We have called by different names brethren of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. Guess what Joe Biden's going to do on January 20th in his inaugural address? He's going to say something similar. This is the first time a president says, we got to unite. I don't care what political persuasion you are, but we're all Americans, all right? This is his way of trying to unite. I may be a Democratic Republican, but that doesn't mean I don't like you, okay? We are all collectively here together to work towards bettering our country, okay? If there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it. So what's that? He's basically saying at that point, hey, if you stand against this, you're wrong. We'll allow you to say it, but we're going to let you stand there so we can point out how wrong you are. You're going to be a monument of stupidity. Now, the high irony here is that he had argued before that the federal government was wrong and that a state government should argue against the federal government. Anybody know what document he wrote that basically said it's okay to ignore a law? Not quite, Chuggy. In a weird way, you're not necessarily wrong, but I'm thinking specifically of something in American history. Okay? To give you a hint, he wrote a document that had a state in its title, and so did his buddy. Matthias beat you. So did Baldwin, for that matter. Okay, Baldwin and Matthias are correct. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Okay. In those documents, he and Madison both argued, okay, that a state could nullify or not follow a federal law that they felt was unjust. Okay. This lays the groundwork for what eventually Calhoun will argue during the Tariff of Abominations during Jackson's term of office, and then that will also lay the groundwork for the Civil War. Okay. The argument over whether or not a state can just not follow a law of the federal government was settled by the Civil War. All right. That's why right now, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember when Obamacare was really starting to come out. Some of the states were saying, we're not following it. We're not doing it. And the federal government went, oh, that's cute, but you are. Okay. Whether you like it or not. When gay marriage was passed, the Supreme Court came down with their decision in 2015. There were a couple of states that said they're not going to get married here, and the federal government was like, yeah, they are. Okay. When schools were desegregated in the 1950s under Brown versus Board of Education, if a state said, not in this state, the federal troops would come in and be like, no, seriously, in this state, it's going to happen. Okay. Now, it took some time to do that, but they do have federal authority, and it was settled by the Civil War. Okay. So, needless to say, he's saying those wrong opinions will be tolerated, but we are going to point out how wrong they are. Okay. I know indeed that some honest men fear a Republican government cannot be strong, that this government is not strong enough, but would the honest patriot, in the full tide of successful experiment, abandon a government which has so far kept us free and firm of the theoretic, and visionary fear that this government, the world's best hope, may by possibility want energy to preserve itself. I trust not. I believe this. On the contrary, the strongest government on earth. I believe it is the only one where every man, at the call of the law, would fly to the standard of the law and would meet invasions of the public order as his own personal concern. Sometimes it is said that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he then be trusted with the government of others? Or have we found angels in the form of kings to govern him? Let history answer this question. Believe it or not, during Lincoln's first inaugural, he's going to refer to the better angels of our nature. This is on the eve of the Civil War. He's going to refer to the better angels of our nature. He's literally channeling Jefferson. So weirdly enough, Lincoln's channeling of Jefferson in 1861 proves that Jefferson is right. Okay, that hey, if there is a challenge to this government, people will step up to fight. People will challenge that. They will not allow this government to just fail. Okay. Let us then with courage and confidence pursue our own federal and Republican principles, our attachment to union and representative government, kindly separated by nature in a wide ocean from the exterminating havoc of one quarter of the globe, too high-minded to endure the degradations of others, possessing a chosen country with room enough for our descendants to the thousandth and thousandth generation, entertaining a due sense of our equal right to use our own faculties. Here's the thing. He's talking a very Washingtonian. Washington believes that we are a very large continent that will be spread out, and at some point we will go sea to shining sea. Jefferson comes close to doing that. Okay? He's kind of hinting at a land acquisition. What land acquisition? Add-on. Matthias, Louisiana Purchase is correct. So needless to say, he is kind of hinting that we are going to grow territorially, okay? To the acquisitions of our own industry, to honor and confidence of our fellow citizens, resulting not from birth, but our actions, the sense in them, enlightened by a benign religion, possessed, or professed indeed, and practiced in various forms, yet all of them inculcating honesty, truth, temperance, gratitude, and the love of man. So he's saying, okay, we have a religion, we have religion. But as usual, Jefferson downplays the religion. Instead, he sticks to honesty, truth, temperance, gratitude, and the love of man. Those are the principles not of religion per se, but of what time period? Come on, folks. I'll tell on Mr. Flickinger because he went through this last year. Sierra got you on that one. Enlightenment. It is the Enlightenment. Remember the importance of man, okay? Acknowledging and adoring and overruling providence, providence capitalized, so that's God, which by all of its dispensations provides or proves that it delights in the happiness of man here and his greater happiness hereafter. With all these blessings, what more is necessary to make us a happy and prosperous people? Still, one thing more, fellow citizens, a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor and the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government. This is necessary to close the circle of our felicities. Okay. In that statement, this has been widely circulated and utilized as a source of information for people that argue against a specific function of government. So when I say that the government shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned, what issue might be argued against there? So here again, taxes. Taxes, it's taxation, okay? There are people that will look to Jefferson saying, hey, taxes being high would be anti-Jeffersonian, okay? About to enter, fellow citizens, on the exercise of duties which comprehend everything dear and valuable to you. It is proper you should understand what I deem essential principles of our government. This is where he's going to list out essential principles of government. So for those of you taking notes, I'm just going to, instead of reading through this, I'm going to tell you what he feels are the actual essential government principles. 1, justice. Justice to all men. Okay, that's number 1. Okay, he says equal and exact justice to all men. Okay, of whatever state or persuasion. So he's saying across the board, doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter who you are, you should all get justice. 2, he says peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. So what does that mean? No alliances. Be neutral.
Can you repeat the last one you said?
Okay, so the first one is justice. Okay, the second one is no alliances. Okay, now of course, he was highly critical of this before. Now he's saying, no, that's a good idea. Whose idea was it originally to be neutral? Matthias was definitely anticipating that question. It is Washington. Okay, you've got to type it. Sorry, Stauffer, it's not a home field advantage here. So needless to say, you know, with his neutrality proclamation, Jefferson was totally opposed to it. Now, there's a reason why Jefferson is totally opposed to neutrality back in the 1790s, because it was neutrality in a conflict with what country? Matthias was again anticipating. It is France. Okay? So again, it is a French thing, and keep in mind, Jefferson is a huge proponent of France. But by the time he's saying this, the new issue is England. So it's a little hypocritical for him to say, hey, no entangling alliances, when now the issue is England. Okay? Of course, then again, it's going to flip back where France is an issue, because who is going to rise to power during Jefferson's time in office? Sierra, of course, was ready for that one, anticipated, and beat Matthias. Now it's just a showdown between Sierra and Matthias. All right, so just to be fair, Sierra and Matthias, go ahead and take a break for a little while so that Carol can complain about somebody else getting points. Because it's certainly not going to be her. So again, 1, justice. 2, no entangling alliances. 3, support of the state governments. Okay, that we have to make sure that the state governments are taken care of. Okay, which again goes right in line with what he talked about when he wrote the Virginia and the Kentucky resolutions along with Madison. Okay, it says zealous care of the right of election by the people. So 4 would be direct elections. Okay, that when you're elected, you are elected by the people. This goes right along with his argument that he, you know, we are all Democrats, we are all, you know, Federalists, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't matter what political persuasion you are. In the end, we're all Americans, and the election counts for all. So elections are free and direct. Okay. 3rd one was support of states. The support of state governments. Okay, that state governments should thrive. So to recap again: 1, that you have equal justice. 2, that you have no alliances, no entangling alliances. 3, you're going to support the state governments. 4 is that direct elections are free, that you elect your individuals, your presidents, your whatever else directly. Jeez, folks, come on. 3 is the state governments are supported.
Hey.
Oh, dear God. 4, again, is direct elections. Carol, this is why you don't get points. 5, okay? 5. It basically has a whole bunch of language, but what it boils down to is majority rule, minority rights, okay? The majority has the rule. So he is saying up front, Democratic Republicans won. So you're not going to like what we do, but we won. So we get to kind of turn the government the way we want, but we're not going to dominate you. We're not going to oppress you. So minorities have rights, okay? Now, of course, he doesn't mean at that point minorities as in race or creed or whatever else. He's not, of course, talking about that. Keep in mind, Jefferson is still a slave owner, okay? So he's not concerned about that. When he says minority, he means the people that have less votes, okay? So keep that in mind moving forward. All right. 6, a well-disciplined militia. Key word, militia. Okay. Does that mean military? No. He doesn't want a standing army. He's nervous about a standing army. He's worried that if the army is there, that a president could become too powerful and use that army against its own people. Okay. So the idea here is I don't want a army, okay? I don't want, by extension, a navy. I want a militia, okay? What is a militia? It is a armed group of citizens. You remember from the American Revolution, it is the Minutemen, the guys that grabbed their weapons and ran out the door to protect their hometowns, okay? So keep in mind, the militia was very important during that time period, okay? We still have militias to this day. They're a little less important. And of course, they don't have the firepower of our American military by any stretch. So that's why I always kind of marvel at these guys that show up at, you guys have seen some of the protests on TV where people show up at the State House and they're wearing, Kevlar vests and they've got, M16s and they're, walking around. And a lot of those guys are part of the militia. Now, you and I both know if they met up against the American army, your little M16 is cute, but a tank is going to run you over, okay? So these are the guys that kind of guard your states, if you will, and if you talk to them, they still think it's a very important thing to do, and I'm not going to discredit it, but in modern day society, it's not quite the same thing. Militias don't have the same firepower as the American government, okay? But this is what Jefferson's concerned about. If you have a professional army, it can be used by a dictator, okay? So in a weird way, he's kind of saying, look, I don't want a standing army because I don't want that kind of power and responsibility. But of course, what is going to be a problem? What happens when one of those countries decides to create a problem? Okay, now, the answer is going to be war, of course, and you're not going to be prepared for it. There's a reason we're not prepared for the War of 1812. There's a reason we're not prepared to fight the Tripoli pirates. There's a reason we're not capable, or the Barbary pirates as they're known, okay? There's a reason we have problems, okay? Now, the high irony is during this time period, the Marine Corps is going to be basically born during this time period because they need this. It's kind of like it germinates out of the militia structure, if you will, out of necessity. Right? But Jefferson almost kind of leaves us open to attack because of that. 7, it says the supremacy of the civil over the military authority. What does that mean? There will never be a military governor. It's always going to be an elected official. We're not, the will of the people matters. There is a general fear. And of course, like I said, Napoleon rising up in France is that fear. There's a fear that if the people can't rule over their country, that the people will turn to a military authority to take over. He's saying, I'm telling you right now, the government of the United States will always be run by somebody that is selected by the people. It will not be a military coup, okay? 8, it says economy in the public expense, the labor may be lightly burdened. What does that mean? Lower taxes. Okay, so 8 would be the easiest way to put it is we're not going to take money from you. We're going to take what we need and nothing more. Now keep in mind, if you're not paying for a military, that's going to lessen your burden. Okay, because most of your tax money goes to a military. Okay, 50 cents on every dollar goes to a military. Oh dear God, folks. Civil over military authority. Okay. Oh dear God. 8, lower taxes. 9, honest payment of our debts. So we're going to pay our debt. Here's the next question. Honest payment of our debts would fly completely in the face of whose economic vision of the United States? Higgins. Got it. It's Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was still alive at this point. He's going to die in a duel 3 years later because of Burr. But at this time period, Hamilton's still hanging around, and it is his assumption of debt program that Jefferson doesn't like. So him saying, hey, we're going to repay our debts, that's not Hamiltonian vision. So he's almost kind of telling Hamilton on the first day, hey, you know the program that you've been trying so desperately to form? I'm against it, and now I have the power to do something about it. Okay? Because then it would just be inflation. Oh, we'll get to it. This is a discussion for another day. All right. 10, if my numbers are correct. Encouragement of agriculture. Farming. So 10, he wants farms. Keep in mind, he is the yeoman farmer guy. He's the guy that believes that farming is the most important thing and the backbone of the United States. So he is going to kind of hold the fact that farms are going to matter. Keep in mind, this is a plantation owner. Okay? He's been born and raised on a farm. 11 says the diffusion of information and arraignment of all abuses of the bar of public reason. All right, so what's that basically saying? We're going to have a fair communication of information. So what he's basically saying, instead of having newspapers that only print propaganda for their side of an issue, we're going to try and disseminate information where it's fair. You know, no more of like, here's the only viewpoint you're going to read, and then this other newspaper is on the complete other side of the issue and presenting it as if it's fact. This is still applicable to this day, correct? Sure. Because how many of you tune into news and you wonder whether or not it's a news service? Okay, because you may be getting their version of it. You know, how many times you tune in and you hear Donald Trump kind of, and look, he rose to prominence because he kept on saying things like, well, that's fake news. Okay, so it's a very Jeffersonian vision to say, hey, the news is skewed. Let's try and kind of keep it centrist, if you will, which is kind of highly hypocritical, by the way, because he was one of the main proponents of anti-Washington newspapers during Washington's time in office. All right, what are we up to now? 12? Okay. Freedom of religion, press, and person. It's a nice way of saying the First Amendment is going to be enforced. That the First Amendment will be of primary importance. Now I'm going to try and get done here in the next couple of minutes. Okay? No. All right. Carol, nobody likes you. Stop. So, the wisdom of our sages and blood of our heroes have been devoted to their attainment. They should be the creed of our political faith. All right. What does creed mean? What does creed mean? Okay. Tamang is correct. Okay, a moral code, you could even say it's a belief in, and I'll go ahead and give it to Chucky as well. It can be religion as well. Creed means a religious or moral teaching. Okay, so he's saying this should be the religion of our political faith. Okay, the text of our civics instruction, the touchstone by which the services of those we trust. All right. So in the end, he says that this list that I just gave you is the creed or the religious teachings of our Constitution. This is what we should be following. Now, whose belief structure is this? It's Jefferson's, okay? So if Jefferson is proclaiming these are the belief structures that we should follow, no matter what, does that not fly in the face of, as hypocritical if he's been saying all this time, hey, we're all Americans, we're all Democrats, we're all Republicans, we're all Federalists, okay? So it's very hypocritical that he starts off saying we're all going to come together, but let me tell you exactly how we're going to come together and what we're going to do moving forward. Okay? This is Jefferson at his finest. He is totally hypocritical, and he doesn't even apologize for it. However, this is also him living out exactly what he said. We are a majority, so therefore we have the will of the people. This is a word that I don't know, and this is way extra points if you know it. Does anybody know what the power of the president is coming into office called? It's sometimes called the will of the people. What the president comes into power. When the president comes into power, he has all this power from the election because he literally can point and say, look, the people just elected me. Okay? It's a word that starts with an M. Okay? And again, it's just the power of the president coming into office.
What's the next letter?
Carol's asking for the next letter. We'll go M-A. M-A-N.
How many words?
No, it's not manifest destiny. M-A-N-D. Tamang is correct. Mandates. That's correct. Mandates. A mandate is the power coming into office. So this is the first. Remember I told you at the very beginning, this is the first one ever given in Washington, D.C. This is also the first inaugural address ever given that clearly states that I have a mandate and I'm going to do this. Okay? Everything else has been a rah-rah speech of, hey, yay, I won, and I'm so proud to be president. Thanks so much. Washington and Adams both kind of, if they could high-five the person giving them the oath of office, that was basically their inaugural address. Okay? They thanked the people that got them there, and that was about it. Okay? This one is saying, thank you so much for getting me here, and here's what I'm going to do while I'm here. Okay? Now, he keeps going on, relying then on patronage of your goodwill. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead way too much. Sorry. So I repair then, fellow citizens, to the post you have assigned me, with experience enough to subordinate offices which have seen the difficulties of this greatest of all. He has served, like we said, in the Secretary of State, but he's also been the governor of Virginia during the Revolutionary War, and he wasn't good at it. Okay? He was widely criticized for running away when the British invaded. Okay? So he hasn't exactly had the greatest time as an executive. All right? So needless to say, I've done this kind of stuff before. He then says, I have learned to expect that it will rarely fall to the lot of imperfect men to retire from this station with the reputation and the favor which bring him into it. What is that saying? Hey, I know that I'm coming in and you like me now, but when I leave, you won't like me as much. Okay? And that is every single president. It's a very honest assessment. In 2008, people crowded into Grant Park to celebrate that Barack Obama had ascended to the presidency of the United States. At the time, he had somewhere in the neighborhood of a 70% approval rating. When he left office, it was somewhere in the 40s. Okay? People still may have liked him, but they didn't appreciate the job that he was doing. You don't come into office and leave office with the same approval rating. It doesn't matter who the president is. Okay? Donald Trump came into office and had an approval rating of about 48%, and it went down. So the highest he ever got wasn't even 50%. And that's normal across the board. Biden may have the same problem. Okay? So again, when you come into office, they may celebrate when you're taking the oath of office, but you depreciate like a car after that. You know, you buy a new car, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it loses thousands of dollars in value. Presidency, the same way, okay? So again, this mandate, he has it right now, but he's going to lose it awful quick, okay? Without pretensions that high confidence you repose in the first and greatest revolutionary character whose preeminent services had entitled him the first place in the country's love and destined for him the fairest page in the volume of faithful history, I ask so much confidence only as it may give firmness and effect to the legal administration of your affairs. So he's referring to Washington, okay? He's desperately trying to be like Washington, or better than Washington, or remembered in the same vein as Washington, okay? I shall often go wrong through defective judgment. When right, I shall often be thought wrong by those whose positions will not command a view of the whole ground. This is his nice way of saying, I am the only person that sees the whole thing. Congressmen see their districts. Senators see their states. I'm the only office, and keep in mind, he's right. He's the only government position that is the representative of all Americans, okay? So he's saying, look, you may not like it because you're from Kentucky, but if you saw America from where I'm sitting, you would understand that this is a problem that needs to be fixed, okay? I ask your indulgence for my own errors, which will never be intentional, and your support against error of others who may condemn what they would not if seen in all of its parts, okay? So again, he's saying, look, I'm going to be wrong from time to time, but wrong in your eyes, not in mine, okay? Which is a nice way of saying I'm right even when I'm wrong. Relying then on the patronage of your goodwill, I advance with the obedience of work, ready to retire from it whenever you become sensible of how much better a choice is in your power to make. And may that infinite power which rules the destinies of the universe, and notice again, may that infinite power that rules the destinies of the universe is a nice way of saying God. It's a deist way of saying, okay? Lead our counsels to what is best and give them favorable issue of peace and prosperity. Again, why does this matter? He is setting forth principles, okay? And this is kind of the whole point. When you're going through documents, notice how we have looked at what is happening around the document. What has happened before it, what happens after it. We've talked about how, okay, Washington and Adams came before. We've talked about how after that, after this speech, he's going to go off and purchase Louisiana. So he's sitting there talking, oh, well, we got to be constitutional. The Louisiana Purchase was not constitutional, okay? So he's going to violate, he's going to be a hypocrite all the way through this. He says, hey, there are countries that we have problems with. That's a precursor to the Embargo Act and the War of 1812 and whatever else. He's going to say, hey, we don't need any army. He's going to be proven wrong, okay, in a multitude of ways during his presidency and then later on into Madison. However, notice the three presidents here, Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, all come from the Democratic Republican mindset. They're all Jeffersonian, and they've all served 2 terms. So that means for 24 years, we have the same mindset, the same principle, and it's all set out in his inaugural, okay? So this is a mission statement for about a quarter of our history, a quarter of that century, I should say, okay? So he's setting the tone for Jeffersonian America. It's not going to be changed until Jacksonian America, which will be what I talk about today on the video that I produce here. If you have any questions, you can certainly hang back. A reminder that you need to turn in your notes to prove that not only you had read it beforehand, and I will be paying attention to timestamps, but that you also kind of have been paying attention throughout this and writing out and reminding me that what was number 7, what was number 10, all that stuff. So please make sure that you have kind of taken some notes down, make some final observations about it, and then submit it for your credit here. Okay, for those of you that got extra credit, it will be added onto that assignment. Okay, this will be a 50-point assignment. It's the easiest 50 points you can get. It's literally submitting notes that you should have taken during this session. If you need to rewatch the session, I of course forgot to press record at the very beginning, but I got you about a third of the way through it. So for those of you that missed the last bit because you were sleeping or you were getting annoyed at Sierra, Matthias, and others, then it's there for you if you need it. Again, if you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, have a great day, folks.
Bye, V.
We'll see you later, Sapphire. Bye, Josh. Randy, wake up. You have to log off. Sorry.